Greetings and welcome to another episode of Leading Our Adventures, your Venturing BSA podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Todd, and I serve as the 2023-2024 VP of Program for the National Officers Association, and I'm thrilled to be accompanied by our special guest, Asher. In today's episode, we'll dive into the fascinating realm of trading and patches and all these other memorabilia items of scouting. Stay tuned to gain valuable insights into this exciting world. What might look like a piece of colored cloth to one person could be another person's whole world. Asher, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to tell our viewers a bit about yourself before we jump into the patch rabbit hole?
Of course. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Asher Embry, the president of the National Capital Area Venturing Officers Association. I'm also the Tradery Event Chair and Trading Post Chair for the Megamec Whippet Lodge, among a bunch of other positions within my local units and lodge. I love collecting and trading patches, and especially in my home council and lodge, I have quite a lot, and we'll talk about that later.
Awesome. I can't wait. Can you provide an overview of the significant patches in the BSA and why they play such an important role in scouting?
Sure. So patches have a lot of roles in scouting, so they're not all just for decoration on a uniform. So a lot of the patches that a scout might first earn is going to be their rank or their unit number or their council shoulder patch. And each patch that you wear on the uniform has a meaning to tell someone about the scout. So where they live, what leadership position they have, all sorts of things, all sorts of maybe events that they went to. And then there's also a fun side of patches within BSA. So councils and Order of the Arrow lodges, they'll make more than just a generic patch that everyone can wear. They can make some commemorative patches, they can make fun patches, they can make whatever they want, really. So this can be an event patch for like a jamboree, National Order of the Arrow conference, a camporee, whatever you can think of.
It's so fascinating. Like there's ones that you get to put on your uniform to kind of like put you in a patrol or a crew, or ones that we all wear as scouts across the world. But then there's also those fun ones that you were talking about. And not going to lie, I'm going to learn a lot on this episode because many scouts enjoy collecting and trading patches. I've seen it at Jamboree. I've seen it at the National Order of the Arrow Conference. But specifically for you, what sparked your interest in patch collecting? Like, how did it start?
Yeah. So I started collecting patches really, really basically at the 2017 National Jamboree. So my Scoutmaster, he was both my Scoutmaster in my troop and for the Jamboree troop. He was telling everyone like, oh yeah, no, you got to trade patches, get some patches, buy some ahead of time. I traded patches when I went to the Jamboree as a youth, and I had so much fun. So I was 13 years old, first class, super tiny. The hair was just about this long still, funny enough. I had just a handful of patches, and I didn't know what to expect. I came home from Jamboree with lots of cool patches, quite a bit I still have today that are some of my favorite patches. Some amazing stories on how I got them. After Jamboree, patch trading kind of fell off for a couple years because I didn't really have an opportunity to do so. I didn't really know anyone to trade patches with. And then I did my ordeal to join the Order of the Arrow, and my section conclave was 2 weeks later that my lodge was hosting. And I brought some patches with me because I heard, oh, you can do patch trading at the OA stuff. So I brought some patches and did some trading, and that's what started it.
Very cool. Is patches kind of just a OA thing, or can you get into it in venturing, and how does that relate?
So you can do it just in scouting as a whole. So a lot of airmen do patch trading because OA makes a lot of cool patches, but there's nothing stopping you as a venturer, or if you're a Sea Scout or just a scouter in general, that you want to trade patches because they look cool, or you want to collect patches because you've been to all these places around the country and you want to get something that reminds you of them.
That's fair. Could you share a memorable experience relating to patch trading or collecting during your time as a scout?
Sure. One that immediately comes to mind is like really memorable is that my chapter advisor sent me an email saying that, hey, I saw you trading patches, and to send him a list of all the patches that I had, because he also trades patches and collects them. I didn't expect him to email me a couple hours later a list of about 100 different lodge flaps from my lodge to give me to grow my collection, more than doubling my collection at that point. So my parents drove me over to his house, rainy night, and late 2019, I believe, and on his front porch, and he's just like, here you go, and he just gave me a grocery bag full of patches. And he gives youth patches in the chapter all the time who want to get started collecting. We're always going back and forth. Like, he gets some patches from going to an event, he'll grab an extra one for me and give it to me. I'll go do the same if I happen to get an extra patch of something that he didn't get. So it's a great relationship we have.
And in that situation, you went with your parents to collect said patches following the youth protection protocols?
Yes, they did.
And that's good to hear. The rain and all, you guys ventured into the rain to collect patches.
Yeah. It wasn't super rainy, it was just sprinkling.
Well,
I like to say that, though, as the ambiance.
I see. And you mentioned earlier the different types of patches, from merit badges to special event patches. Those are kind of the ones that I know about. But you are more knowledgeable in this than I am. What are the different patch categories, and maybe the terminology?
Yeah, so there's a lot of patches. If you go to the scout shop, a lot of the patches that you're going to find are for recognition. So it can be merit badges, it can be ranks, it can be position patches, it can be any other kinds of awards that BSA offers. Patches can also commemorate an event that you went to, like a camporee. So they're small, they'll have a button loop. So for example, a patch for an event that I just ran the other day, Venturing lock-in. So that commemorates an event that we did. You can wear them, hang them off your uniform. They're what's called a temporary patch. Patches that go on the left shoulder and have the name of your council are called council shoulder patches. This one's a National Jamboree patch from my council, but here's the standard issue one from National Capital Area. And those are, various councils make them to have a identity for their area. So they'll have symbolism for why their council is that name, or maybe a landmark in that area. There's also lodge flaps issued by the Order of the Arrow Lodges that you wear on the pocket flap of your uniform to signify membership within the OA. So lodges can issue special lodge flaps also for pretty much any reason. So you can issue them for fun. You can have a standard issue like this one for a Mega Mech Whippet Lodge. But generally they're for like a major national event or to commemorate something. So like your council's camp. And then another major patch category are large patches called jacket patches. So they're meant to be worn on the back of a jacket, but you can put them on anything. So you can put them on a patch blanket, you can frame them, do whatever you want, get creative with it. You can't wear it on a uniform though. So one example is a lodge back patch that we had made recently.
It's like as big as your hand.
Yeah, it's bigger than my face, just a little bit. And there's all sorts of other categories, subcategories of patches. So if you get into the weeds of it, lodge flaps have all sorts of different designations, F, S, W. I won't get into that, but it's just more categorization and sorting of how they are.
And this might be a categorization or sorting project, but you talked about the standard issue. What's that?
Yep. So a standard issue patch from a lodge or a council is the generic patch that is sold in the scout shop for members to wear. So it can be it's something that's mass produced. It's simple. It's easy for everyone to recognize. This is where I live. This is the council that I'm in. This is the lodge that I'm in. They can be fun, but they are just general purpose. They don't have a specific, like, they were issued to commemorate this jamboree. They were issued to commemorate this camp. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. I think what I'm hearing is there's this like special ones, CSPs, council strips, just for events that if you want to go more in detail from your event patch like you talked about, or then there's also your ones that kind of everyone wears or everyone starts off with. Does that
Yeah.
hit the nail? Okay.
Yeah.
Very
So
good.
when you see a lot of people wearing patches on their uniforms, they'll generally be wearing the standard issue patches. Sometimes they might pick up a cool patch from the scout shop and put that on their uniform because they like it or they went to that event. So there's no real enforcement as to what you can and can't wear on your uniform, shoulder patch and log flap wise.
I see. And with all of them, how many did you say you had?
If I were to go and count, which there's too many to count, it's probably over 1,000 at this point.
Wow. Do you have one that's like your favorite?
There's a couple that I really like, but right now it's the set that that I designed for the 2023 National Jamboree. So its overall arching theme is the cherry blossoms, big feature of DC, big landmark. It's huge tourist destination in the early spring, so March, April timeframe. Mm-hmm. And then also the shoulder patches that went around the big jacket patch have aircraft, each operated by a branch of the United States military, because we have such a large military presence in the national capital area.
That's really cool. And what's kind of the process? So do you just design it and then you make it, or what do you mean when you say you design, like you made it or you designed it?
So it can be either a really simple process or a really complicated process, designing patches. Depends on how you want to approach it and whatever technology you might have access to. So I know people who have taken a concept and scribble it on a napkin, take a picture and send it to a patch company. They'll make it, and it's an absolutely like beautiful, amazing patch that you would not think was started off as napkin art. You can also take time and fully render something in Photoshop, make the art, spend all the hours beforehand sending it to the company so that you have it exactly the way that you want it. So in previous years at our district Klondike Derby, we've actually had activities where scouts and patrols have a piece of paper with a little circle on it, and they're told, make the patch for next year. So they'll draw up something, and that is the patch for the next year's Klondike Derby. So it makes all sorts of cool designs.
That's so cool. Like, wow. Are there any patches that hold sentimental value or carry unique memories to you that you have in your 1,000+ patch collection?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind first is the lodge flap that I was given once I did my ordeal in May of 2019. It's one of our older lodge flaps for the Air Force Memorial. Nothing too special, but to me, it's more of a just like, this is my first step within the Order of the Arrow. This is my first step in my journey, and I've had many amazing opportunities within the OA, so that's why that one matters to me a lot.
That's fair. That's very, very cool of the different impacts that a patch can make, the different memories that can come when you see said patch. And we talked briefly about the designing process and how simple or ornate that it can be. How has the process kind of evolved and become what it is today from, I guess, when we were wearing patches 114 years ago, starting like the scouting movement in America?
Sure. So patch designing has definitely evolved and grown over the years. The biggest leap that you can kind of talk to is computerized embroidery. So you can make finer details and you have more consistency within the production of your patches. A lot of older patches, they'll have slight variations between them because they were all done by hand, and they weren't computerized to be all consistent, everything the same. So if you're in a catalog and you're looking at patches, they might say MVE next to it. That means there's a minor variation because they're older, and that's just the production process at the time. Some lucky collectors, they'll actually be able to hunt down design sheets for those older lodge flaps and patches, which I've seen a couple, but I don't own one physically because those are pretty rare to find. But today, patches, you digitize them on computer software and you embroider them with computerized embroidery machines, so they're much faster to produce and they're much more consistent to produce.
That makes sense. Cool. Are there any specific patches, interesting designs? I'm sure you could put a lot of things on it. We want to make sure you stay away from copywriting and things like that. But are there any particularly interesting or innate designs that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, any patch that you show to someone, they might say, wow, this is a really cool patch. This is my favorite patch. I love the details in it. And other people can just look at it and say, it's okay. Not my favorite, but it's cool. One patch that I'll highlight with some interesting design features and how I designed it was the 25th anniversary of Venturing shoulder patches that I had designed for my council about a year and a half ago now. So for me, it was definitely a struggle to figure out how to make 25 prominent in the design, but also have something that shows what venturing's about. So have some sort of venturing imagery. So the message that patch conveys is simple, but a bunch of other patches that you can look at, they might have a little detail with a really big meaning that you don't really think of when you first see it. So there might be like 3 birds in the sunset of one patch, and you don't know what that means. It's just 3 little birds, but to someone else that could mean 3 influential people in their life. It could be 3 anything. It could have any sort of meaning. Or it could just be 3 birds.
Right. So one patch is like a storyboard?
Yeah.
Potentially?
Yeah, so it's like how if you say a picture is worth 1,000 words, a patch can also be worth 1,000 words.
Interesting. I've seen on some of the catalogs that you were talking about that some are marked like limited edition or rare, or maybe I'm at my local tradery and somebody's like, oh no, you cannot have that patch. That's rare. Can you share like what they're talking about? Any of that terminology? I guess I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of patches, that might be rare, or they might be a limited quantity produced, compared to a regular patch, or you just make a smaller run. So a small run can be different between councils and the size of their collector base. In my council, National Capital Area, if you make 100 patches, it is considered a small run for us because we just have so many collectors in this area, so many people that do things to earn those patches or purchase those patches. But some councils, a small run could be 50 or 25 patches for like Wild Heath staff, for example. So my council first started making patches of different monuments and landmarks within the DC area. And they made 10,000 of each. So you have 10,000 of the Pentagon, 10,000 of the Capitol building, right? So you have 10,000 of all these, and they sold them for $5 each. But then they made 100 with the same design, and they made a shiny gold border. They sold for $50 as a collector's edition to help raise funds for the council. That was about 20 years ago now, and those gold border patches, they're pretty tough to get, tough to find. There's only 100 made or so. Some they made extras of, but even then, like I have maybe a third of those shoulder patches, the gold ones. So they're tough.
See, that's tricky, and I guess they go up in value, and it could be a fundraiser opportunity or just an opportunity to showcase design skill.
Yep.
Interesting. Learning so much here. Have you ever come across a patch that turned out to be particularly valuable or sought out by collectors that you were just like, oh, Yeah, that was a cool patch.
Yep. One patch that really like fits this question was a jacket patch from one lodge I collect, Gutatan Lodge out in Western Kentucky. So I was out there at their tradery last March because I knew a lot of people there, and I did camp staff there. That's the lodge I collect on the side. So early on Friday, I had driven 10 hours, so I was there hanging out, kind of tired. And one of their traders offered me a harder jacket patch. They made about 50 of them. It's big arrowhead, an uncut version of their set from all the events of that year. And they just wanted a couple of patches that I just didn't really care much about. So he offered me that, and I was like, yeah, I want that, please. We both had a fair deal. We were both happy with how it turns out. But like inside, I was just freaking out. Like, how is this happening to me? How am I getting this patch? And those patches, you don't really see them all that often because they made 50 of them. And when you get them, it's pretty expensive.
One patch for another patch is usually what I see, but I guess some of them have different values to different people.
Yep. So yeah, if you're trading, like you might start off doing a 1-for-1 trade. If you're just doing out at Jamboree or out at NOAC, you'll be just walking around doing 1-for-1s. So like, hey, I have this cool lodge flap. You have this cool lodge flap. You want to trade? So you might do that. But if you get into the more specifics and more rare patches to collect, you might end up doing a more like, this patch is worth, say, $200, and I have 3 patches that are worth $50 and a couple patches that are worth $20. You work it out so that cash-wise or value-wise, those are equal trades.
I see. So it's like a bartering system with patches. You learn
Yes.
how to trade. I see. And people of all ages do patch trading, or I've seen that happen at different events. Did that patch that you just put up have a venturing logo in it?
It did have a
Does it have
venturing logo in it.
does it have a story?
Yeah, so we made this also for the 25th anniversary of Venturing. It has a shoulder patch too to go with it. So I just wanted to make lodge flap for my lodge for Venturing because we had a Sea Scout flap made a couple years ago, and there wasn't really any Venturing flap, and we have a lot of venturers in our lodge because we're a large lodge. So I made something. I was like, man, I really want to have something that's cool. It's going to stand out. So I found some patches that had like a geometric background. I said, I really like that idea. So I'll make it with venturing green and yellow, have it gradient between it. So it's a really cool patch, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
It's a really cool story. That walking billboard of even more when you wear your venturing uniform, when you have that logo. Like, what's that? That's really cool. And we both know, and we've talked about, that patch trading is a common practice at different scouting events. What advice would you have in scouts engaging in patch trading, especially those who might be new to the experience, maybe got a few patches given to them, maybe their parents had some that they used to trade with, or maybe they went to an event and got some extra patches from that event that they went to. Like, how do you get into the experience?
Sure. So I have a kind of a 2-part answer for a new trader, but still anyone can follow this information. It's still good information and advice to follow. So the biggest one is to leave anything that you don't want to trade. Just leave it at home. Don't even take it with you. So lots of stories at the National Jamboree last year. Scouts brought patches that they wanted to keep out to the trading area. They put them out. They say, hey, look at my cool patches. And then they just disappear. They either forget them, someone is on scout-like and takes them away. It's not a great thing. So if you're at a Jamboree and you don't have a big plate or a place that you feel comfortable keeping your patches, keep them in the bottom of your backpack. Know where they are. Kind of keep your patches secure because a lot of people like patches, and unfortunately, not everyone it will be trustworthy with other people's patches nearby. And then the second big piece of advice is to bring a buddy. Both just to have someone that you know that's with you, but also if you can get a buddy who might be more experienced with trading patches, they can help you make sure that you're getting a fair deal, and you can watch them and see how they're going to make a deal trading patches. So even with me recently, like I'd say I'm relatively experienced, but going with someone who's also experienced, and they'll tell me like, hey, you're offering too much for this patch. Back off, go find someone else. Don't scam yourself, basically. So yeah, those are two of my big piece of advice.
Buddy system, and leave patches that you don't want to trade at home.
Yep.
I know one time I haven't traded very many patches, but one time I accidentally traded a patch that I wanted to keep and give to my brother, because he's kind of starting to get into patches. And I accidentally traded the wrong patch. Oops. So maybe there's another struggle. I don't know if you've ever experienced that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
That's good to know. I'm not alone in my learning how to do this stage of patch tradingness.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage to regret doing a trade. Maybe a couple days later, a couple hours later, it's like, man, I really shouldn't have traded that. That was a cool patch.
Right. Man. Yeah, it always gets you. Well, not always, but it's happened a few times.
Definitely does.
Are there any specific scouting events that stand out as particularly rich in terms of unique or special patches? I know you talked about Jamboree, or tell me more.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned Jamboree, but also the National Order of the Arrow conferences, or NOACs, for Order of the Arrow members. So both of these events, they have a reputation for scouts spending a lot of time, or all the time, trading patches wherever they can. So walking around at Jamboree, like I was in a line for some sort of activity, there's people trading patches in line. There's people trading patches next to the line. There's people trading patches everywhere. You can walk 30 seconds and you'll find a bunch of people trading patches. My favorite experience with that is just walking around with people who have blankets set up and basically just going window shopping, seeing all the cool patches that people have. But also on a smaller scale, more local to a lot of people and frequently occurring rather than every couple of years, are traderies, which generally they're held annually at a place for people to buy, sell, and trade patches and scouting memorabilia. So this can be uniforms, handbooks, magazines, anything scouting related, you can find it at a tradery. So traderies, they're not always in one location. They're kind of spread out, but a lot of areas you can find a tradery within a couple hours drive, and most of them have a free or low cost to attend.
Well, that's really cool. Kind of a Antiques Roadshow kind of vibe, with just patches where people are selling, buying, trading kind of scenario with history.
Yep. And then a lot of people who go to these shows, they've known each other for years, so it's also kind of a social gathering for a bunch of people who trade patches. So someone who lives in, say, Pittsburgh and someone who lives in Virginia Beach, they might go to a tradery that's within a couple hour drive of them, and they can meet up, hang out for the weekend, catch up, trade patches. So it definitely is also a social event.
Perfect. Patches bring a lot of people together, it's sounding like. And as scouting evolves, I wonder, as a patch collector, I'll call you a professional in this state, but how do you see the world of patches and patch collecting evolving as well throughout the next 10, 20, 30, 100 years of scouting?
Yeah. So I think the biggest evolution we've seen recently is putting QR codes on patches. So a trader can pull out their phone and then take a picture of it. Oh, wait, this one doesn't have one. I picked the one that didn't have a QR code. Sorry. So it has a QR code on the back of that patch. So you can get information on the patch. So like who made it, how many of those patches were made, some other relevant information to the patch if there's more in the set that belong to it. A lot of traders have various opinions on the QR codes. I also have my opinions on it, but when the information on a patch is correct, it is definitely helpful to know about those patches. In a couple years, we might see NFC technology so that you can see in like a tap to pay. So like you pay with your phone, tapping it to the register. So you might see those in patches to redirect you to like a council web page or information about an event.
That's really cool. I didn't even know that existed before having a conversation before this episode. That's very, very cool. Maybe you can be the person who puts that into action. You're making history here. Are there any trends or challenges like patch designing and collecting that you anticipate in the future?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind that started kind of recently in the past couple of years and larger events that I've talked with a lot of traders, and they put this to words a lot better than I can, is a patch arms race, so to speak, from councils. So NOACs and jamborees, there's councils that want to say they have the biggest set, they have the rarest set at the event. So they have to introduce artificial scarcity to a patch. So they'll make 25 of, so they'll make like their big main set, and then they'll make 25 with a different border color. So it seems like a good idea to councils because they can make money out of it, but it also is not great because it'll turn collectors away because of these rare patches that are just unsustainable in the long run to make. So one thing that I would like to see in the future is that councils realize that making less patches overall in the long run is better. So you have a couple really good patches. They help the youth traders actually trade more than just a bunch of patches that just look okay and just do accuracy by volume and just throw a bunch of patches out there.
I see. It's kind of like a quality versus quantity kind of
Definitely.
situation happening there. Cool. Valid. That's awesome. For those that maybe are watching and are interested in starting their own patch collections, maybe are intimidated by the 25 kind of start, the idea of that. What advice would you have for them to kind of get them started and enjoying that experience?
Sure. Again, this one also has a two-part answer. So the first thing is to start small. So you want to find one thing that you want to collect. Don't go all big, broad. I want to collect everything. That's unsustainable. You'll get burnt out real fast. So you can say like, oh, I want cool patches from my council. I want to get a shoulder patch from every state. I want to collect my favorite superhero. Or, I mean, it can be anything, but start off small is the important thing. You don't want to get burnt out, but you also want to have a challenge with collecting what you want to get. So the challenging collection for me is patches for venturing. So that's a little side collection. So I can have the word venturing. It can have the venturing emblem. So I can have all sorts of stuff. So I've made a couple of venturing patches. So it really helps that I have a couple of these to trade. If people have a venturing patch, I'll say, hey, I got a venturing patch. You want to trade for yours? And then the second part of that answer is also just don't be discouraged by the people who have huge collections. A lot of the people who have been collecting and trading patches, they've been doing this for decades. They've been doing this forever. So they've gotten their patches over a long period of time. So just remember, at one point, they started out just like you. They might have only had a couple patches. They might have had a handful of patches from their dad or mom or whatever. But these people also have adult money. They have jobs. So they can go and buy patches that are rare and expensive that you as a youth might not have that access to just yet.
Fair point. There you go. I like these answers. They're all coming in twos in lines. It's very cool. Is there anything else that you would like to share about your passion for patch collecting? Any upcoming events or releases that venturers and other listeners in the scouting community might find interesting?
Yeah, sure. So patch collecting, I'll just give like a bit of advice. Patch collecting isn't always about getting the rarest or most exclusive patch. Really, it's just about having fun, meeting new people, making friends. Some of the best friends I've met through patch trading. And I'd love to do things other than just trade patches back and forth with them. So I've been on camp staff with some of them. I've gone out and gone driving around in DC and exploring all sorts of cool things. And really, the big thing with trading is if both sides are happy when you shake hands and finish a trade, that's a good trade. And that's really what trading's all about.
I love it. Grab your buddy and go patch trading is what I'm hearing. That's really cool. Well, thank you, Asher, for sharing your insights in the wonderful world of patches. I know I've learned something, and hopefully listeners, as they're starting out, have learned something too. Even venturers can get on the patch trading bandwagon. Thank you again to our listeners for tuning into this episode of the Venturing BSA podcast, Leading Our Adventures. And we'll catch everyone next time on the next adventure. Until next time, stay adventurous and keep leading the way. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.